You're listening to the Generation to Generation podcast, episode 17. On this episode of the podcast, we're talking with counselor Mike Sense. Mike is a co-founder and CEO of the Global Counseling Network. As global cases of COVID-19 continue to climb, and as we look at the growing economic crisis, fear and anxiety can quickly rise in our hearts and minds. In this time, the need for counseling and a place to process what's going on internally and externally in our lives only continues to grow. Mike, over the years, has desired for others to experience wholeness, feeling cared for, loved, connected with, and challenged through counseling. This inspired the founding of the Global Counseling Network and the endeavor to see standards of care change for those in places with limited access. In our conversation today, we look at the importance of counseling in our current world, how we as the church can use technology to minister and care for those in our communities, and the place of online counseling for people to get help. As always, I hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening. My name is Michael Coggin, and joining us on the podcast today is counselor Mike Sense. Mike was born just outside of Seattle, Washington, but has called 8 states and 3 continents home over the years. He attended Covenant Theological Seminary, where he received his Master's of Divinity, and has ministered in domestic and international campus ministry through the Acts 29 Network and the Presbyterian Church in America. One of the things that has stood out to me about Mike over the years is his love for the Lord and his love for people. He currently counsels families and couples, and he and his wife Susanna just had a daughter named Maggie. Mike, it's great to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, no, it's great to be with you, and that was very well done. I was listening to those things and thinking, wow, those things are true about me.
Yeah. There's a lot more.
No, great to be with you. It's I know the podcast's been really beneficial for a number of people, and always good to get to hang out a bit.
Yeah.
Even if other people are listening.
That's right. Well, I've really been looking forward to this conversation, Mike. And, one of the things, I think it would be helpful just in light of just everything that's been going on, just to say that we're actually recording this on Monday, March 23rd, and just things have been so fluid the past week. And so I thought maybe a good place for us to start would be, I'd just love to hear how you and Susanna have been doing in light of the past few weeks, as far as what's kind of been going on with COVID-19 and the economic downturn, and just how that's been for you guys.
Yeah. So as far as downturn, I'll, maybe we can circle back to that later, because it, somewhat relevant to Global Counseling Network and such. But as far as how we're doing, we were in Colorado for about a month and cut our time short there, as there were just questions swirling about kind of what exactly travel was going to look like, and so we didn't, as much as we love Colorado, we didn't want to be stuck there, and so ended up coming home a little bit early, and we really kind of were in a place of seclusion, and so our experience certainly colored by that a bit. But re-entering into St. Louis, we got back roughly about a week ago, and it's been like everybody else, life is different. Lots of walks that were going on, and it's certainly provided unique ways to connect with our family and our friends, doing it over video, and so there's been, I guess, like with anything in life, there's been beautiful things and some hard things. It's pretty sobering that my parents aren't gonna get to really spend any time with their granddaughter for at least the next couple months. And
so how old is Maggie right now, Mike?
Yeah, Maggie is a few days short of 9 months.
Wow.
So she's 9 months, and my father this August will turn 85.
Okay.
He's a very young 85, but 85 nonetheless. And so any time that we get with them is really precious and valued. And so yeah, it's certainly a strange time to say the least. But overall, I mean, we really enjoy where we live in St. Louis, and it does provide a lot of stuff to do outdoors. And thankfully, our daughter really enjoys being in the stroller and looking at everything. And so yeah, overall, I think doing well.
That's good. Well, it's over the years I've had the privilege, of hearing your story and just, been so thankful for you, Mike. And just was wondering, if you could share a little bit with our listeners, what led you into the field of counseling and about the ministry of GCN, the Global Counseling Network.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, part of the background, as you mentioned earlier, from the Pacific Northwest, about 45 minutes north of Seattle, in a small outpost called Monroe. And we grew up poor. Granted, we lived on 15 acres surrounded by mountains, and it was beautiful. We had horses and lived in a trailer, but it was amazing. But one of the things that came out of that is seeing my dad try several different companies, starting companies, and failing a couple times. And even though he was working in the corporate world, trying to, start a project here and there. And then eventually that ended up leading us to sadly move to Kansas City. I mean, Kansas City's a great place, but it's not Seattle. And my dad started a company there that ended up being, doing well. And so for me, really seeing people start companies was, for me, it's kind of like, well, what else do you do? If you see a problem, you can go out there and try to fix it. And so that really, part of the background for me, is seeing my dad, who's one of my heroes, do it and bootstrap and work hard and grow something. And really kind of the principle of just taking a swing.
Yeah.
That to me is, whether it's someone starting a business or someone moving their family across the planet to be a missionary, or, moving away from kind of the homestead where, they've been for generations. There's just a deep admiration for people who are willing to take a swing.
Yeah.
Played baseball growing up and sports, Mike. And you don't sit on a third strike. You take a swing.
That's right.
And so that is a very deep value that my father really thankfully ingrained in me. So upon graduating seminary, I thought originally going to seminary, for an MDiv and then added a counseling degree. I thought I would end up being a church planner. Go back to East Central Indiana, where I was living prior to seminary, and did not feel called to that. And so I had to figure something out, which is usually what people have to do after seminary. But I was working on another startup with a friend that was way beyond our capacity. Great idea, still a great idea, but it was way beyond us. And then a friend of mine came along and said, no, this online counseling thing, you need to do that. And so part of the background also is that I spent time for about a year in Western China as a missionary back in 2004, 2005. And that experience always stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
People who are kind of at the edges without access to quality care. Before I moved there, there was a couple. They were both counselors, and they served the about 250 missionary community in that city of about 1.5 million. About 300 Westerners, most of which are missionaries, and they left right before I got there. And I just remember people talking about just how deeply missed they were,
Mm-hmm.
and how they were just a real source of rest and kindness for a lot of the people in the city. And so that I never knew that was going to lead to starting a company that does that, but again, it always stuck with me. And so after graduating seminary, it just like I kind of said earlier, saw that the problem was out there, access to quality counseling in the online setting wasn't all that readily available, and so set out to figure out how to solve that problem.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things I remember. We've had conversations over the years. Sherry and I lived in St. Louis for almost 20 years, and you guys are there, and there's just so many therapists in St. Louis, just I really respect and just am so thankful for. But just the reality that, even in this country, there can be some real challenges. We're now in a community that our town that we live in has around 15,000. The county has 100,000. And in Western North Carolina, just really limited as far as resources. Actually had someone reach out today that was looking for someone who specialized in trauma work with adolescents. And, in St. Louis, there was just a lot of options, and so that's one of the things I've been really thankful for, for you, Mike, and just this ministry. And, even on GCN's website, it says just this quote that I really appreciated, that change, healing, growth is a process. It is often like a journey into uncharted territory. These can be dark places, but undoubtedly beauty is there too. When we are aware of ourselves and present with one another, relationships can begin the restoration process. Everything we do as the Global Counseling Network, from the counselors we invite onto our team to the technology we use, it all aims towards creating a space of trust and safety. And this is a place where you can be heard, where you can be in process. And so just was wondering, if you could speak more to GCN's philosophy of counseling, and maybe, you mentioned kind of your seminary training, just the impact that Covenant had just even on that philosophy of counseling.
Yeah. Thanks. It's really kind. As I was listening to that, I was like, man, we have some good writers. In personal life, my wife acts as my editor and my Grammarly.com. She says
my wife does too. So it's it's a full-time job for Sherry with my grammar issues. So
I know
she is very gracious and very kind with me, but it's a lot of work to.
She looks at me every now and then and says, how do you have 2 master's degrees and you don't know that? It's pretty shocking.
So you played baseball, I played football, so I have more probably head trauma. So it's like that's what I kind of go to. So it's just
I fell asleep throughout high school English. It was at the same time of the day for all 4 years, which is right. Part of the. So
it's never good when it's after lunch.
No, 2 hours, 6th period every single year. But as far as one of the and we've talked about it since, and I think about it often. You and I had a conversation. What's coming up on probably over 5 years ago of where we were, I was just kind of asking about what it takes to run a good counseling agency. And I kind of posited to you, I said, well, it seems like you develop people fiscally, if you train them professionally, and then you treat them like adults, it seems like that's all it takes. And you responded with, it's really not that difficult. And that's something that we've really operated on. Mm-hmm. We want our people to be paid well, be trained well, and to give them the freedom to do what they're called to do. And, and granted that takes a high level of trust when you hire people. Sorry, laptop. Granted that takes a high level of trust, when you bring people on. But it also just, causes there to be an environment of a high level of trust, a high level of safety. We've had one person leave in 4.5 years, which is I think a real testament to the quality of the people that we bring on, but also the environment that we try to set up for them. Where it's one where, again, they run their own schedule, they charge what they want to charge, and then they meet with the type of clients that they really want to meet with. And we've just found that to be kind of our magic sauce, if you will. But yeah, as far as, my time at Covenant, just wildly formative, as far as what some people would call Christian psychology, other people would call kind of the integration model. I kind of personally, I like to, call it, counseling as Jesus would, I guess, which is, more or less the foundation of our counseling is the word. It's what we see in Scripture as far as kind of, to some of the bigger questions of who is God and who is man. If you don't start with those, and if you get those wrong, then a lot of things end up going sideways. That being said, is of course the Word of God being so foundational. Yet, as we all know, by God's common grace to all, we have doctors that know how to do heart procedures, and learn those heart procedures from people who weren't believers. Yet those heart procedures are healing and life-giving, and I guess we could say true, right? As they heal the body, and so likewise, we give our counselors all kinds of freedom and space to draw from different people, whether it's Christians or non-Christians. I think it was Chesterton who said, "Truth is truth, no matter where it comes from," and that's that's what I believe to be true, and something that we allow our counselors to practice from. And so it was really, really special during my time at Covenant, seeing professors who loved the Lord, loved people, and were curious.
Yeah.
If you're not curious, then being a counselor's not for you.
Yep.
And if you're not curious, owning a business is not for you either. And it could be for you, but it'll be short-lived, unfortunately. But to see professors who were not afraid to look at authors who weren't believers, or to look at authors who not only weren't believers, but maybe are antagonistic toward any type of faith, but to be able to examine and to be curious and ask questions, to prosecute, if you will, even lightly, certain books, certain theories, and see, okay, ask the question, what's true here? What's good here? That probably was one of the most formative things that my 5 years of seminary helped me with when approaching anything, whether it is a store, a type of ministry, a book, a piece of art. Being able to walk up and the first question and the first step toward it to be the question of, well, what's good here?
Yeah.
Instead of, well, well, what's bad here? What do I hate here? What do I disagree with here?
Yeah.
The Lord doesn't start with his people in that way. He doesn't start in Genesis 3. The Bible actually starts in Genesis 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know the Anselm Kiefer piece actually at the St. Louis Art Museum, Michael, the big one of Chernobyl.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to hate that piece.
Yeah.
I would avoid it at all costs. I didn't even look at it for several years. I would encourage anyone to take a look at it. I think it might be titled 11 Rods.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Excuse me, I think I'm getting that wrong, but you know,
it's one of the hidden gems of St. Louis is just the art museum there, and just so miss having that just right at our back door.
Oh yeah, and it's for the audience, it's actually free too, and so that's another and we're actually within walking distance of it, which makes it all. It's called Burning Rods, by the way. Came to mind, but to actually start spending time with that piece and really start asking again, well, what's good here? What's beautiful? And it's shockingly become one of my favorite pieces in the building, even though it's hard to look at times. But so I think per your question of the impact of covenant, that was one of the major things of asking that. Well, what's good here? Which translates into starting a company of that does online counseling, because another thing that a covenant that Professor Zink was really big on, Dan Zink, was this idea of embodied presence.
Yeah.
Which in the online counseling space seems kind of ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
That being said, though, apart from this idea of looking at what's good here, I don't think I would have ever started an online counseling company, because I just would have looked at it as all bad.
Yeah, I think that's where it's like so fitting, Mike, just even that you're using that just example. And that's one of the things I'm so thankful for Dan and Richard and, Jerem Bars. Just Professor Bars was so helpful, inviting us to ask those questions as far as, celebrating humanity and asking kind of what's good as we engage art and human beings. Just the reality of that we're, sitting in front of a fellow image bearer, and there's just such a privilege and a position of just privilege in one sense to be in relationship to another human being, and especially in light of just kind of the present situation. We with the social distancing, our family went on a hike this past Saturday, and it's really stood out just how much people were really engaging one another. As complete strangers, they were really making eye contact, and you could just almost see. And my wife and I really noticed just people valuing the humanity of other people, that it's like they were out maybe for the first time in several days. But I think even as you were talking about this, it was making me think of a conversation you and I've had over the years, where really there's just been this kind of shift in the past 10 years of kind of online kind of communication, online counseling, and how years ago, for you and I, as we started doing this on Skype, and then as we moved to other formats, just there was such a learning curve, and how usually there were several sessions in those early years where you're really having to process the reality of presence and the reality of relationship over the medium of the internet or Skype, and just it's just a kind of difficult dynamic in one sense to kind of navigate. But how would you say you've seen online counseling and online ministry change over the years, and really provide a much needed resource to people who are struggling and in need of help?
When we started about 4.5 years ago, a question I used to ask right off the bat was, within the first about 10 minutes, just to kind of gauge where we are, I would ask, hey, what's this like for you?
Yeah.
What's being screen to screen. We're not in the same room. We're never going to shake hands. Likely, what's that like for you? And I've seen a very dramatic shift to where I don't ask that question anymore. Like, it's kind of, I've asked that question a couple times within within the past year, and and people are kind, but they kind of look at me like, oh, why are you asking that? Well, not a problem. Why would it be a problem?
Our culture's changed so much, just even in the past few years.
Yes, absolutely. And to their credit, Zoom is one of the companies out there that I think has done a tremendous job with their platform. And their platform's not used for counseling. I know it's a little bit outside the mental health field, but they've done a really wonderful job with their platform as far as enabling just really quality communication and connection, as far as just even the clarity of the picture, the ability to chat, the ease of setting up meetings. They're one of the, they're in that 10% of companies that really don't have to pitch and change in light of the last couple months. So Zoom, it's not stock advice, but Zoom stock, Well,
I think I was on a Zoom meeting today, and I think someone actually mentioned it's one of the few stocks that has not been dropping the past week.
Yeah.
And,
they won't be anytime.
Yeah. As far as, just if you're in vocational ministry, just how many screenshots of church staffs and nonprofit, kind of ministry organizations of Zoom meetings, just kind of on people's Facebook pages.
Yeah.
And I think kind of to that, Mike, I was just thinking, even in the past 2 weeks, I've just so, upended the typical rhythms for all of us, and just kind of this force, stillness, including those who are in vocational ministry, like pastors, small group leaders, counselors. And, there's a lot of conversations that I've had the past, week with people around the country in the church who are, trying to figure out live stream, Zoom, Ring Central for the first time. What would you share, with a pastor or ministry leader who is doing online counseling, preaching, or pastoral care for the first time?
Yeah. One thing that I've told people in the past, and I think by the way, that might be my daughter in the background, but it's a new age. And so,
yeah, that's right.
Distractions.
My daughter ran by about, I think, 10 minutes ago. So, yeah.
Yeah. We live on a really nice street. Actually, I love where we live, but about 3 or 4 blocks, you can get gunshots every now and then. I've always told people that if you didn't know how to build relationships before all of this, it's not going to change.
Yeah.
So the online, I say that to say the online medium, I don't think, or the video medium, I actually don't think it's a big deal. And that much of a barrier toward building a relationship. If anything, we are the barrier to building a relationship. And so my primary question to people early on when we were bringing on counselors was not, how can you do in the online setting? Sure, there's some, that's a relevant question, but the primary question is, do you know God? Do you know people? And do you know yourself?
Yeah.
And if you can, if you have an idea of your story, if you have an idea of kind of what I think Frederick Buechner hits on so well, the nitty gritty of life, kind of the Wendellberry, hand in the soil, noticing the small things, the tension of life, you're going to be able to connect with people, whether it's through a screen or not. And so that I know that's not incredibly specific, but I think
that's helpful.
That being able to again know know yourself, know your own story, is that's going to translate. Riverside Church in St. Louis, Zach Eswine is the pastor there, which is near my church, and our church's live stream was a little wonky, so that's why we were listening to Riverside. But Zach, week in and week out, Zach does a tremendous job at connecting with his congregates.
Yeah.
And I saw zero difference in who he is on the screen versus who he is in person.
Yeah.
And there, and part of that isn't because I think Zach is great what's that word, Michael? I'm getting it wrong.
Extemporaneous. Yeah.
Thank you. Just could not get it out. And I stopped, I stopped after one try.
Yeah.
I just would have kept on falling over every coffee table in the room if I want to try to. But Zach's not this, just amazing showman or anything, but he's he's a human. I mean, and he knows he's human.
Well, that's the one thing I just really appreciate. Like, even as you're saying that, Mike, just even the freedom for us to be human beings, it's like the freedom for me, like even as I'm doing the podcast, the freedom for me to make a mistake, or the freedom for me to just misspeak, and I think it's one of those things that, I was talking to Sherry about this, just the forced stillness of this change to our rhythm in so many ways, just even exposing some of the performance idols in my own heart in ministry, as far as, identity being connected to how productive am I. But I'm just kind of even that, like, what does it mean for us to be human beings as followers of Christ, to grow in our humanity? And so that's where I'm kind of like wondering, like, what would you, I was going to say, what would you just say to someone who's, making mistakes where the live stream is wonky? And I think back to, I tell this story probably, I think it was like 15 years ago. I was doing a adult ed class at our church in St. Louis, and we had about 50 people in the class. And I had this clip where the whole class was kind of revolving around this one clip. And I got in early. I think I practiced literally, Mike, I'm not exaggerating, for storytelling purposes. I probably practiced the technology piece of it maybe 5 or 6 times just to make sure it was going to work. And so I got like halfway through the class. So it wasn't at the end. It was like halfway through the class where I'm building up to this, and I go to do it. And to this day, I don't know why it did not work, but it's just like crickets, and you got all these people looking at you, and just, you get flooded with shame and performance stuff. And I do think we have an underdeveloped theology of spiritual warfare, where there's maybe like a specific demon that just focuses on tech issues for people in ministry, and when new heavens and new earth is ushered in, there will be a collective cheer where judgment is brought down on him. But I think I just kind of wonder, like, what would you say, to those pastors or ministry leaders, if the live stream doesn't work, or, if the Zoom meeting for a Bible study, if you spent 2 hours on a Monday trying to make it work and it doesn't work, like, what would you, want to remind, or what would you say you've learned over the years as far as what does it mean for us to be human? It's okay to make mistakes. Technology is not always perfect.
Yeah. So I'm gonna get the quote. I'm gonna get the quote wrong, and so we'll just say it's a paraphrase. How about that? But have you ever read The Supper of the Lamb by Robert Capone at all?
I've heard of it. I haven't read it.
Okay, so it's the subtitle is a culinary reflection. To give you a taste of it, he spends 5 pages on the wonder of an onion, and cutting an onion, and looking at it and examining it. And he said something toward the beginning of the book that I think is I'm still thinking about, and I think, Lord willing, will be for the rest of my life. Where it's something like the pursuit of, if the end goal of something is perfection, you will never be a lover of it. Mm-hmm. And there's something really in that, as far as the pursuit of perfection actually is more of a commentary on me and something going on in me than the very thing that I'm pursuing.
Yeah.
It's like some people will say, well, I want to be a perfect water skier. Just want to be perfect. And I mean, really, as well as I do, you're just going to be wrapped up in form. You're going to be wrapped up in looking at videos, and then pretty soon, a couple of years in, it's just like, man, do I really love water skiing anymore? And so I think with that, when it comes to when you're doing things online, if the goal is to present a perfect person and a perfect seamless video to people, then I wonder what type of embodied faith we're trying to reflect. Because that it's always struck me about funerals, that funerals are this kind of cavalcade of just complimentary things of how great the person was, and it's like 100% just how awesome they were. And it's always struck me a little strange, because it's like, well, like, how is that highlighting like any need of the gospel or any need of grace in their life? If they were just this perfect being that never made mistakes or never had like faults, is that really like what we want to present? And so I think in a much less, maybe intense way, but when recording a video, it is perfection, and someone who like never gets flustered or never has a blemish, like, is that really like what you want to show people? But yeah, I don't know. It just seems to be missing out on kind of the grace that the Lord has for us when we do have blemishes, which is true for all of us. So I mean, that kind of sticks out a little bit.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Mike, and just gonna sign off now, but just so thankful for your time today and just this conversation. Mike has just been such an encouragement and just reminder of what is our faith in, and what does it mean to be a human being, and so just thankful for this conversation and our time. Was wondering if you could close our conversation today in prayer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, let's pray. Lord, what a wonder it is to be talking together and to be having this conversation. Lord, there are, the waters are changing, and they were changing 2 months ago. They were changing 6 months ago, and they're changing today. And whether it was 6 months, a year ago, 2 years ago, or today, this very moment, we need your grace. We need your kindness, Lord. Would we receive that from you and extend that to those that are around us, our neighbors? In your name that we pray, Jesus. Amen.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you've been enjoying the podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you would leave a review on iTunes or Facebook. If you know someone who might enjoy or be encouraged by the show, feel free to share the podcast with them. Your willingness to share the show is one of the best ways to help it grow. As always, thanks for listening. Until next time.